Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio. I'm Morgan Rowe, founder of the Zeitgeist Academy. Every episode here on Zeitgeist Radio, I speak with someone from a unique musical subculture looking to understand their relationship with music. Zeitgeist means spirit of the times. Imagine all the things that make this moment feel different from other times. The way people feel, what they like, the things they do together. That's what we call zeitgeist. It's like a big invisible bubble that helps us understand the spirit or feeling of the time we're in. The idea here is that music may be universal, but each musical scene has its own mini zeitgeist, and that's what we're here to learn about on this podcast. But before we begin, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio and put in your email address. I send a weekly newsletter with backgrounds and stories about our awesome guests, cool musical facts, and ways you can get involved if you love music and want to do more than just listen to a podcast. That's zeitgeist academy.com. My guest today is Marcy Irving, the director and founder of the Central Coast Gilbert and Sullivan Group. Marcy, welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Hi, Morgan. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited. Thank you for coming on. So I would like you to introduce yourself. You are multifaceted. How would you describe yourself musically?
My name is Marcy Irving, and I am on the music faculty at Cuesta College, where I teach rock and roll appreciation. But really, my education and training is in classical voice, and I sing opera and direct opera. I love musical theater. I love choral music. So yeah, I do a lot of different things.
I love it. I love it. When did you get your start? Like around what age were you when you started making music?
I've been singing for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
My dad says I was 3. My mom says that might not be true, but I remember listening to and singing music as far back as I can remember.
Yeah, I love it. So we actually sing in several groups together.
Oh, yay.
But we're here to talk about this project that you have, Central Coast Gilbert and Sullivan. And I'm so interested in this. But I think before we get going, it would be helpful for our listeners to have a little bit of a background on Gilbert and Sullivan. Can you describe who they were?
So Gilbert and Sullivan were Victorian, so 19th century lyricist and composer. Gilbert was born in 1836, and he wrote the words. And Arthur Sullivan was born in 1842, and he wrote the music. And so they're British comic opera. They're in English, and they're kind of the predecessor of musical theater. But the music is really classical-ish, so it's kind of opera and kind of musical theater, and it's just funny. They're funny and also beautiful and serious sometimes, and I fell in love with them right away. And they've been performing them for almost 200 years, so they've really lasted.
Can you name a few of the key, most popular ones that people might recognize?
Well, most people know the Pirates of Penzance.
Yeah.
Because especially there was the Kevin Kline, Linda Ronstadt movie in the 70s. So people have seen that. The Mikado is very popular, which we just did last year. And HMS Pinafore, those are the big 3 that everybody knows.
Yeah. My high school definitely did Pinafore. I've seen Pinafore a couple different times. I remember it was my high school did that one. Yeah.
Gosh, were you in it?
I was a choir kid. I was not in it. It was before I joined theater.
I'm jealous.
But it was, I wanted to.
I wish my high school had done something like that.
Yeah. And then I also saw it separately as an adult. A community theater up in Portland put it on, and I had a friend in it. And I actually have a moment I want to share later on about that. But yes, HMS Pinafore, definitely one of my favorites, just because it's one of the ones that I've seen.
Yeah, it's great and funny, and the music is great.
It's
and
very funny.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your first Gilbert and Sullivan show that you ever saw was?
Yes, it was actually Pinafore. It was HMS Pinafore, and I was maybe 4 or 5. It was made for kids. It was a kiddie production in a gym somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. And yeah, I remember it vividly. I remember the costumes and the singers, and little Buttercup handed out peppermint drops to the kids. And yeah, it was probably life-changing for me, because the most spectacular thing ever. Yeah. The
What's
costume.
so interesting to me about going to these shows is it really is like you mentioned the crossover between opera and musical theater. The experience is very much like musical theater, like going
Mhm,
to a Broadway comedy.
mhm.
but but yes, the singing is more operatic. There are techniques that are used that are more opera. So are you able to speak a little bit to like that influence on musical theater? I feel like Gilbert and Sullivan, they must have been kind of right there on that edge when that other genre started to be
For sure.
branching off.
Yeah. Gilbert and Sullivan, well, music halls and vaudeville and that kind of thing were considered kind of tawdry. Like you didn't
Yeah.
with your family.
Were they
And so,
vaudeville?
no, they weren't on
Okay.
purpose. They were
Okay.
respectable, you know. And so you could bring your wife and your kids and it would be clean and I think Rodgers and Hammerstein and Showboat, Jerome Kern are direct descendants of the Gilbert
Totally.
and Sullivan shows. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hear
Uh,
quotes sometimes, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sondheim have directly quoted Sullivan. So it's like, yes, yeah.
yes. Um, let's talk about Central Coast, Gilbert and Sullivan. What led you to start this project, this organization?
Well, I've been obviously Gilbert and Sullivan obsessed my whole life, and I my dream was that Gilbert and Sullivan met a man named Richard Doyleycart in the 1800s, and he formed a company, the Doyleycart Opera Company, just to perform their works. And when I was young, that company was still in existence. So it was my dream to go and sing for them.
Uh-huh.
But unfortunately, they went out of business in the 80s. So I was kind of out of luck.
No.
And then I had always had it in the back of my mind to form a company like that just did Gilbert and Sullivan and did it traditionally. And actually, Cassandra Tarantino, who I think you probably know, her choir was doing we're dear friends, and her choir up in Paso was doing a Pirates of Penzance medley. And she asked me to come up there and talk to them about it. And it was actually her. I'd always had it in my mind, and she's like, you should really start your own company because you're so into it. And I'm like, I have often thought about that, but I don't even know how to start to do something like that. And she's like, well, I'll
Yeah.
help you. And poof, yeah, the next year, I think we did
That's
our first.
amazing. What is it
Yeah.
that excites you so much about Gilbert and Sullivan?
You know, it's really hard to say. I had the albums when I was a kid, and little kid, and I just loved it. I loved the music was so happy, I think, and I loved the words. I've learned so much vocabulary, even before I knew what the words meant. I loved them. They were big and fun to say, and I loved the characters.
What are some good words?
Oh my gosh,
Putting
that's
you on
really
the spot.
putting me on
Sorry.
the spot. Yeah.
I'm just wondering. Are they
Um,
juicy Victorian phrases that we
yeah,
don't use
there's a lot
anymore?
of gooey, wordy. He's pretty wordy, actually. I mean,
Yes.
a lot of people that are introduced to him is like, wow, that's a lot of big words. But
Well, modern major general, right? Is
yes,
that's them, right?
yes,
Yeah.
that's them.
I
Yeah,
think any theater kid, if you did theater, you probably know modern major general. It
yeah,
was the standard warm up for getting your
right,
diction going.
right. And that's kind of the whole point of it is a whole bunch of big words all strung together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's funny.
And I think because it's happy,
Yeah.
I could dance around to it. And I loved the costumes and the whole theater thing. I just loved it. I don't
Do
know.
you have experience with theater also?
I have done personally some musical theater, not too many like non-musical things, although I did props in high school
Sure, sure.
for our
I'm just
play.
thinking here you are starting this production company. Like there's a
Ah,
lot that goes into
there's
staging.
a
How did you
lot.
even start
Well,
approaching
I've
that?
done quite a bit of musical theater actually, and I had done a lot of opera choruses and that kind of thing.
Sure.
I love theaters. I just love being in them. And so actually because Cassie and I were both musicians, we hired Elaine Fournier, who was part of the Cuesta Drama Department, to actually make sure we were doing the theater part right.
Nice.
And so,
Building
yeah,
sets and things.
it was brand new to me, finding a set designer and a lighting person and a
Yes.
sound person and a this and that and costumes. And yeah, it was big.
Yes. So how does it work with the staging? Where do you perform and how does that like how do they allow you to take over their theater for however long?
Yeah. Well, I'm on the Quest of Music faculty, but we are actually part of the community programs that does, community outreach. And so we do get a discount on using the CPAC Performing Arts Center. And we also get free rehearsal space here at the music building. So that's super lucky. We couldn't do it without that.
Yes.
That's really expensive to rent those spaces.
Yes.
So yeah,
So when you build a set, I'm on sets right now. I'm just trying to think like how this would work.
Absolutely.
So when you build a set, how do you do that? Do you do the design, or how do you conceptualize what you want it to look like?
No, actually, sets are the hardest part. We hire someone to do that. So we find a set designer, usually from a local community theater program, that designs it, and hopefully they live somewhere they can build it. This year, actually, it's being designed by a student of the set program at the theater department.
Nice.
And the theater class is building our set as their project, which is great. It's super neat. Yeah.
I love that.
And which is great because it's already in the theater. So all we have to do is put it on stage. We don't have to transport it here and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Do you have giant trucks?
We rent giant trucks. Everyone in the company that has a pickup truck comes and helps. We rent a ratty old shed out on the National Guard base behind campus, and we store them all there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So what about costumes then? So that the times that I've seen, I mean, these are like costumes, like ball gowns and like
they are. I love them. I love them so much. We've had several costume designers over the years. Karen Rusu is from up in Paso, is our current costume designer. She's fantastic. And she just loves doing the research, and I show her the pictures of what it looked like, and she builds them most of the time. So yeah.
This is amazing. How do you decide, like, can you walk me through what it's like to stage an entire production, starting with like choosing? And here's a question too, because when I was reading up on them before our conversation here, I mean, they wrote a decent number of shows together, but not an infinite number of shows.
Right. So yes.
How do you choose which ones to do? How do you look at the future of your organization and kind of plan out your seasons? And then when you go to execute, like tell me all of the things.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, there's only 14 of them total. And what we've been doing, we started with Pinafore because it's one set and it's, pretty compact. So what we've been doing is doing an unusual one followed by a popular one. So we do a new one about every other year because obviously Pirates of Penzance brings in money, and then you do a weird one the next year and it doesn't. So it keeps us afloat to switch them out. And so since there's 3 or 4 that are quite popular, we've just been alternating those. When we get to the end, I don't quite know what we're going to do. We might expand into some musical theater, or we might just keep cycling. We'll see. Yeah.
Okay, so you've chosen, let's say you're doing a popular one this time around. So you've chosen that. What happens? What can you, like, I have no clue what goes into all of these moving pieces. What is your life with this?
Well, as soon as I choose the opera, I start casting it to make sure that we have a cast. And we just have the best group of people on the whole planet. And so I sometimes audition and sometimes not, because I know what singers we've got. So I cast it. We hire a set designer and we tell the costume designer what we're doing. And who else do we do right away? We have a props person who handles all the props. We start negotiating with the theater. We do it in the summer in June. So school's over. So that's how we get our dates.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a mess of stuff. We have by now a pretty established group of people. So, Paul Osborne, who I know you've talked to, does our chorus master. Jennifer Martin conducts our live orchestra. So we have a staff basically in place now that we go to. Yeah.
Nice. So you're the puppet master.
I kind of am. Yes. I coordinate everybody, and then I actually do the directing. I was lucky enough to sing in a professional Gilbert and Sullivan company.
Cool.
Right out of college, and they were the same kind of idea. They did very traditional productions. And so some of that I borrow the staging from them. And some of the traditions of sort of like movements in business can go back all the way to Gilbert. So I use some of those, and some of it we just add it, make it up.
Yeah. So when
I
you
get,
talk about traditional versus not, what would examples of each of those be?
well, for instance, the copyrights expired in the 1960s. Before that, you had to do it the official way. And then, for instance, Mikado, right after the copyrights expired, there was the hot Mikado and the jazz Mikado and the this and that and all these, different kinds of productions. And there's a place for that. There really is. But I really like to keep it traditional myself.
Sure.
Yeah, people can basically do whatever they want to with them now.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So then the costumes probably also, because I know sometimes theater production companies will put like a modern spin on things, but you're saying like there's ladies in ball gowns and
Yes, our pirates. Well, the Doily Cart Company, did them in a certain way, and so I try to make them look like that. So, for
Sure.
instance, our Pirates of Penzance has great big hoop skirts, and
Yes.
yeah, and I really think it's funny when they're tromping around the beach in their giant dresses, and it adds to the funny, I think.
I think so
Yeah.
too. That was the one I've seen my friend in Pirates of Penzance, and yes, she had to learn how to walk in a hoop
Yes,
skirt. It's not the
it's
same. Their
tricky.
sense of balance is all
No,
different.
and getting up and down if you end up kneeling and have to get up, it's tricky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
certainly couldn't sit down.
But we formed a Dickens. Yeah, sitting down is tricky. We formed a Dickens caroling group, and we go out at Christmas in our Pirates of Penzance costumes with our
Oh
hoops
my
and our
gosh.
bonnets and everything, and Christmas Carol. That's one of our fundraisers. So
That's
we
amazing.
get a good use out of them.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do you own all of this? Does the company own all of this stuff?
We do actually own it. It costs us $30,000 to put on a production, so we fundraise that, and then we like I said, we have a weird storage shed out in the back, and all the costumes and sets and props and music are all in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It is. It's a good feeling. Sometimes I just walk in there and I'm just like, this is our stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So let's talk about it seems like there is kind of this like world of Gilbert and Sullivan organizations, and it's hard to tell just from like again researching ahead of a conversation versus actually living in it. Is it really a whole community like that of these organizations, or are they all kind of doing their own things across the world? Because there seems to be a lot of them, and some of them talked about like renting or kind of sharing items and sets and things. Is that actually how it works?
There's actually a ton of them, way more than you would think. There is an international Gilbert and Sullivan festival that happens in England every year. I'm dying to go. And yeah, they will rent out costumes and sets, and even like will hire an orchestra, because people from all over the world come, and you don't want to have to fly all your stuff to England. So
yeah,
they rent out, and people do kind of work together if they're local and send each other costumes and sets and that kind of stuff.
Do you do that with other groups too?
I have loaned out a lot of our costumes to other groups, even other non Gilbert and Sullivan groups.
Sure.
That just need, a Victorian something. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Opera Slow and us, we will often trade stuff. So yeah, it's a nice resource.
So again, I've not really spent a lot of time performing in operas. I've done a few musicals, and I had a really, really, really fun time in them, but it's just not something I've done a lot of. So I'm just picturing, again, I'm really stuck on this ball gown thing. So my friend was in the ball gown. She's a certain person. And then if I were to go in the ball gown, I'm a very differently shaped person. Yes. Like it seems like costumes must I know that items can be altered, but it just seems like a lot.
Yeah. So when we start in April, the costumer shows up and measures everybody.
Yeah.
And then she either needs to make them their own dress, or if they're a funny size, then she makes one, or we do adjust them.
Wow.
And costumers are magic. Like they know how to make them with extra fabric and all this stuff so they can bring them in and out easily.
Sure.
Yeah, theater magic.
Yeah. Wow. Oh
Yeah.
man, I guess I just secretly really want to wear a ball gown.
I think you should come and sing with us.
It
It
would be
sounds like
very
you need
fun.
a dress.
Sounds like I do need a dress.
Yeah. My sister went to an opera ball. She borrowed one of our great big dresses with the wig and the whole bit. And yeah, you can
Yeah,
come wear one anytime you want.
amazing. I might do that. Gilbert and Sullivan were quite the pair. Did you know that phrases like, let the punishment fit the crime, and what never will hardly ever, are in our vernacular because of these productions? I have some really fun tidbits I'm sharing in my newsletter next week. Head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio to join us.
I would like to mention that my grandmother, my grandma Tilly, who was my dad's mother, she loved Gilbert and Sullivan. And she passed it on to my dad, and he passed it on to me. And when I was very young, you can't see them, they're back here, but I used to stage the operas with my Fisher Price people in my playroom. So I would put on the album, and I had a whole cast of Fisher Price people, and I would set up books to
Oh my
make
gosh.
and I would stage all the operas. And so now I tease my cast. I'm like, you guys have arms, because when we were kids, they didn't have arms. So I'm like, I know where you should stand and what you should look like, but I don't know what to do with your arms. And so they're always making fun of me and doing weird arm things.
Oh my gosh, that's
But
funny.
this has been such an amazing experience to work with real actual people.
Not Fisher Price dolls.
Right. Although, they were singing along to the recording, so they sounded great.
That's true. And I imagine people have attitudes sometimes.
Sometimes, there's some adventures, there are, but it's been incredible. And I'm so lucky, the group of people. There's so many singers in this town, for a town this size to have this kind of musical life.
Kind of silly.
It is kind of, isn't it? It's weird. It's freakishly weird.
Yeah, it is.
Before I moved here, I lived in Reno, which is a much bigger city, but there wasn't nearly this vocal talent that we have here.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have started this company there.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like access is like there's funding, there's access, there's like a very well-trained audience that likes to go out and go to live music.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite shows or favorite moments in shows?
Oh gosh. Actually, everyone thinks of the patter songs like Modern Major General and stuff. They think of Gilbert and Sullivan. And I really like to point out to people the moments that aren't that. The moments that are beautiful and real, and love duets, and there's some just gorgeous arias. And I like to say, look, it's not all that. In between that, there's like amazing ensembles, and there's just beautiful, true moments. And I think those are my favorites. Some of the soprano arias where, she stops and sings, and it's like, oh yeah. Opera we're doing this year is probably the most serious, and it's just got some gorgeous choral music in it.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that. There's been a lot of folks talking about it.
Yes, yay. This year we're doing the Yeoman of the Guard, which is, I'd say it's B-level popular. It's not the most.
I'd never heard of it.
Oh, yeah, see, most people haven't. Sullivan really wanted to be a well-respected classical composer, but he was most famous for writing these comic operas. And so he kept begging for a serious libretto that he could, with death and like normal operas. And so Gilbert finally wrote him something that was not entirely serious. It's got some really funny stuff in it, but it is a little bit more musically hefty than some of the other ones. And there is a death at the end, which is tragic. It's very sad.
Very sad. That is opera.
It is. I mean, almost every grand opera has some death at the end. So yeah. Sullivan was very satisfied with it.
How did you decide that you wanted to do this one?
Well, actually, this is my sister. I have a younger sister. She's a year and a half younger than me, and this is her very, very favorite. She likes the tragic stuff. And she's been saying for years, why haven't you done Yeoman? Why haven't you done Yeoman? And I'm like, okay, this is the year.
Nice. Does she sing with you?
She might come down and sing this one because it's her favorite. But normally, no, she lives in the Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So here's a question that is a little more local to my listeners are all over, but here in San Luis Obispo, as many of you know, this just from the people I've had, I've only lived here for coming up on 3 years as of this recording, and already like so many of my guests have been people here, like my network just went poof. Like so many amazing people, amazing musicians in San Luis Obispo. um it almost gets to where it's a bit of a logistical challenge because there's so many places to sing, so many places to perform, and it is a lot of work to do a
Yes.
theatrical production where you have to memorize lines and memorize movements and all, not just hold a score. So
Mhm.
how do you work with other people in the community when it comes to this?
Well, actually, when I first started this, part of the point was to give local singers a chance to do roles.
Sure.
I was singing in opera slow in the chorus there when I first moved here, and there were incredible voices in that group, but they never got to, stand up on their own. And so I thought there's enough singers here, to absolutely do this. And so it was to give local singers a chance. And so I did work directly with opera slow to make sure that we didn't conflict with them because it was a lot of the same singers.
Sure.
And then I had been in master chorale for many years. And so I recruited people out of there and I had all the Cuesta choirs to work with. And, my friend Cassie directs the North County chorus. And so, yeah, they're in Canzona and then Resonance. And so there's so many groups. You're right. You have to really time it so that you don't interfere and take singers
Do
away
you
from other
take that into
people.
account? I mean, you're in several of these groups, so you
I
must take
am.
that schedule into account.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are some conflicts with, say, like the Master Chorale concert is going to happen during our music rehearsals. And you just have to, let the Master Chorale people go, including me, and just carry on because there's no way to avoid everybody.
Yeah.
They'll do a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do your productions typically kind of have the same number of people? Like you said, you have kind of your base. How do you get, I mean, there's going to be turnover and people can't do a season or whatever. Um, how do you do that? Because you said you don't really do auditions.
Yeah. We started out with about, I would say maybe our first show had 15 people in it. Which we were just so amazed that we got a show on stage. We were just so happy.
Yeah.
And now we have about 35 to 40 people every year. It depends on the opera. Like next year is Pirates of Penzance, and all the men want to be pirates.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm sure that we're going to have like 20 men next year. And then it'll, they won't maybe come back because the next year they don't get to be pirates. So, it fluctuates a little year to year. Um,
Yeah.
Iolanthe, all the women get to be fairies. So we had an
Mm.
explosion of women that year. So, I mean, I'm sure you've heard me at Master Chorale. I usually just go around and talk to people and harass them until they join. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my technique. Like
So
this
you
my
identify, do you go by voice or personality or both?
both. Um, well, there's a lot of people, like you said, that want to hold the score. They're scared of the idea of getting up and maybe acting or
Yeah.
having to dance a little or something. And so, that's a hard barrier to get through a lot of times. That's why this year I said, you just have to stand there with your spear and sing. You don't have to do goofy things. I don't know. Usually you can tell the people that are going to be willing to get up and do that. They're a
Yeah.
little bit more silly or outgoing or yeah. And
Yeah.
once they've done it, they get hooked, thankfully. Yeah. So most people do come back year after year.
Nice. And then that also helps give a sense of stability because I know that another in other organizations it can be a little like pick and choose. People get a little choosy like, "Oh, I'll do this one, but I don't like that one,
Right.
so I'm not going to
Yeah.
sing that one." But you need to know that you can rely on these people to show up year
Yes.
after year.
And I love that they want to know what the next opera is. And that
Yeah,
even
that's
though,
true.
right, no, none of them have ever heard of Yeoman of the Guard, but
Yeah.
they're willing to just do it. they're just trusting that it's going to be fun and interesting. And I think that's amazing,
Yes.
because when we do the less popular ones, they're like, okay, we're doing it. We don't know anything about it. And then they listen to it and they learn it. And then there's a whole group of people that know Gilbert and Sullivan that didn't know it before. So
Yes.
that's really
Are you
special.
ever in the shows as well?
Um, Very rarely. Last year, our alto got COVID, and I stepped in and did it. And I, as a 50th birthday present to myself, I did do the alto role that year. But those are the only times, unless a bunch of altos get sick or something, then I'll jump in.
Do you miss that?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
For me now, it's a lot less stressful to direct it because I don't have to worry about what my voice is doing, the state that my voice is in. I can just, I can sit back and watch.
Sure.
I love both.
Yeah. Yeah. And how involved are you? I mean, you're obviously extremely musical. How involved are you in musical decisions? You mentioned that you have a conductor who works with the orchestra, and then Paul works with the chorus. Are you involved with that too?
Pretty much. Well, I already know what I want the music to sound like because I want to do it the way the Doily Cart Company did it, which is the way I hear it in my head. And so I do kind of tell the conductor, here's how I want it.
Yeah.
But I'm not an instrumentalist in any way. So she takes care of all the orchestral rehearsals and all that kind of stuff. And
nice. And then who conducts during the show?
Jennifer Martin does it. Yeah.
During the show also?
Nice. We have an orchestra pit here at the CPAC, which is super lucky. So we have about a 17 to 18 person live orchestra, and she conducts it. Yeah.
That's another amazing thing about this place is there's venues. That's not always the case elsewhere.
Yes.
There's venues. There's a stage with an orchestra pit that a community organization can use.
Isn't that amazing?
What?
Yeah.
There's these missions that the resonance ensemble sings. And there's the pack for the, the bigger groups. Like, there's so many places around here to perform.
It's incredible.
Do you ever go out and about and you mentioned the Dickens caroling. That's so fun. Do you ever do other stuff like that?
That is something we're looking at doing. We would really like to do some education outreach where we go into elementary schools.
Yeah.
Because I loved it as a little kid, and I think they would too. So we are kind of putting that together. And sometimes we'll do like a highlight show, like the Magic of Gilbert and Sullivan night or whatever. Yeah.
Victorian singing Valentines.
That would be a great idea. But see, Opera Slow does a Valentine thing. So I try not to step on other people, Yeah, that would be funny. Show up in your hoop skirt and sing a Valentine. There's tons of songs about love and happiness.
Oh, yes.
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 That would be funny.
What overall do you wish that people knew more about Gilbert and Sullivan just as a culture?
Well, honestly, I just wish more people knew who they were. I when we go around like to hang posters or do publicity, so many people have just never heard of them. And even musicians, because they're completely ignored in music school,
that's true.
Singer,
I did not learn. I mean, I know who they are, but I'm trying to think why I know who they are because I don't think I learned about them in college.
Mm-hmm. Were you a voice major?
I was a piano major.
Oh my gosh, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, as a singer, like your teacher would roll their eyes at you if you mentioned Gilbert and Sullivan. And so I'd really like to change that.
It's funny because it is opera. Like
it is, right? Yeah. I think so. But of course,
not belting.
Voice teachers are like, ew, Gilbert and Sullivan,
Yeah.
Get out the mauler.
Why do you think that is? Because the technique would be the same.
I think so. Yeah. I think because it's light. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think they think of it as musical theater, which, they don't want to teach you in your lessons. I don't know. Weird. But that is one of my projects is to get more musicians interested in it. But also just to get the general public to know who they were, that they exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
And
most
how
people
how do
don't.
you how do you do that? I mean, what would you think is the most exciting or inspiring? What would get people to come or to learn more?
Well, actually, Pirates of Penzance has been really useful for us because people have heard of it. Even
Yeah.
if they don't know who Gilbert and Sullivan are, they know they've maybe heard of the Pirates of Penzance. So you could always go out and say, these are the people that wrote the Pirates of Penzance, and they wrote a bunch of other stuff too, and come and see it and listen to it. And
Yeah.
hopefully we get people that are new to it come and
Yeah.
see
It
it.
is it is a pretty magical place. I mean, I've seen a handful, like I mentioned. I haven't seen a ton, but
Mhm.
it is definitely an interesting space that they live in where there are, like you mentioned, there are moments where they actually kind of get a little philosophical.
Uh-huh.
They have some musings on life and also culture, which is interesting because those musings are relevant, which I find
Uh-huh.
odd. Like it's
Yes.
like this was a Victorian era musical, but people are people through
Yes.
through the years, and we
Mm,
still find the
yep.
same things funny. We still find the same thing.
Yes.
Like, yeah,
Yep.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
The jokes are still funny all
They're
these
still
years later.
funny.
Uh-huh.
That's wild
And
to me.
yeah. And Gilbert was often satirizing sections of British society then. So he'd be making fun of the government or the military or something. And that still plays, making fun
Yeah.
of government is still funny. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of them really do still work, even though they're British,
Yeah.
they cross over really well.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Um, yeah, amazing. So, do you know what zeitgeist means? You must.
Well, yes, vaguely. I'm glad you sent me that little note.
So, zeitgeist, spirit of the times. It's the collective feeling of an era, and all sorts of things go into the feeling of zeitgeist, like what the technology is, what the gossip is, what just the feeling of what it's like to be alive at any particular point in time.
Mhm,
Um, And one of the moments, there's so many ways that people can connect with music, but one of the ones that I love the most is when I feel like I'm part of something bigger. I'm part of a movement. I'm part of, like, I get it. It clicks into
mhm,
place for me, like, oh yeah. Like,
mhm.
um, when, so that's what I would call a zeitgeist moment. What would be either a recent or a memorable zeitgeist moment that you have had?
I think that honestly, I feel that being a part of the music scene in this town, I feel like we're such a community, and there's this circle of people that all kind of move together through all of these musical groups, and being a part of that, I
Yeah.
do feel a connection, to something bigger, like we're this big glob of musicians making all of this music all over. And it's a pretty great feeling to have become a part of that.
Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
true because I run into you everywhere.
Yeah. We had rehearsal last night and
We
we have
have
rehearsal tonight. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So again, I'm fairly new to the area here still, but I can catch a little glimpse into what you're talking about
Uh-huh.
and some of the places I see you are places I see a few other people too, like consistently. So
It's kind of a cliche to call it a family, but it does kind of feel like that. Um,
yeah.
like a little more than a regular friendship when you see people 3 or 4 nights a week at various rehearsals. And then, of course, in CCGNS, we spend so much time together over months and have this
Yes.
amazing experience together of doing a show. And it really is a close-knit kind of thing. It's
Yeah, the times. So I didn't do a lot of. I did few not so well known musicals, but when I finally did get into theater, that was the number one thing that, like, choir and theater, the community that happens. There's just nothing like
there's
it.
nothing
There's
like
not
it.
like there's
Mm.
the connection, and you spend hours and hours and hours and hours with these people.
Yes, yes, yep. And
Yeah.
then, when the show ends or the concert is over, it's like, where are they? I don't, you don't see them for a week or two.
Yes.
What? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Um, well, I'll share a zeitgeist moment that is memorable to me, and it's kind of what we were just talking about, which was going to see my friend. This wasn't a Gilbert and Sullivan specifically, but it was Candide, which is another comic opera, and there's a soprano song where she keeps going, happiness, happiness. Do you know what that one is?
No, I don't.
And just the way that it jumps up like that, you're just hearing the word penis, but it's, happiness, but it's and it's penis. Anyway.
So funny. That's hysterical.
I remember she was working on it, and we were all, in our late 20s, and we were just dying. This is so funny to us. So then, of course, we got to go see her in this show. She got a leading role. She was she did a wonderful, wonderful job. And that scene was so funny. And I just remember watching them perform this. I just remember feeling like this was written like 200 years ago. And this joke is still funny. It's a way, like, we connect, I think, to people or to music, like we're singing Rachmaninoff right now. It's beautiful, and just like there's these feelings of like, wow, and glorious, and so like just divine. But there's this side of humanity too that laughs at penis jokes, like in the Victorian era, and we're laughing at it now. Well, and I just remember so appreciating that humor has lasted, and there's this connection, and just people are people, no matter what century they live in.
Well, like the Fair Phyllis madrigal we were singing last night.
Yes.
Right? Which was written hundreds of years ago. It's like the up and down thing is still funny.
It's so funny. Yes.
Yeah. So yes. Same thing.
I think history has a tendency to get dusty. And I think maybe that's one thing about Gilbert and Sullivan is they're not dusty.
They're not. They're still funny. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I just saw one the other night, hearing the audience laugh at the jokes, all this time later is like, yes. Yeah. They still get it. It's funny. It's
amazing. Well, Marcy, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about Gilbert and Sullivan.
Of course. Paul Osborne always laughs at me. He's like, oh, you're going to talk about Gilbert and Sullivan some more?
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio. If you'd like to take the next step in your musical journey, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio to join my newsletter. Seriously, it's fun and informative, and I never spam or sell your information. That's zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. Music for this episode was created by Ian Boswell. Please hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends you found a cool new podcast. See you next time.